Okay, so this is actually my second time recording this, and that's because the first time recording this, I forgot a couple of things that were important and just kind of talked about stuff that wasn't really important. So let's start over from the beginning. These are OBS settings that I think are very important for you to know before you even get started streaming so that you have the best stream possible for your equipment. Okay, so now that we are here in OBS Studio, my layout might look different than yours, especially because I added some Twitch stuff onto it to make it easier for me. But for now, we're just going to go to do the important thing, and that is going to your settings. Now, if you don't know how to go into your settings, you just have to go to the top left corner where it says File right here, and then you go to Settings. Okay, so now that we are in OBS Settings, the first thing that's going to take you is General Settings. Now, any of this that is already checkmarked, you can kind of just leave alone. Nothing here is really important unless you actually want to change something, like maybe changing this from dark mode to light mode, or I guess what they call ACRI. Oh, that's interesting. I didn't even know that what that was. Anyways, we're going to go back to dark mode though, just for the default. But like I said, nothing here is even really that important unless you want to specify some things in OBS in general. But for now, we can skip all of these settings because they're not important for streaming right now. Let's go to Stream. And right here is where you set up your stream key for streaming on Twitch or on YouTube or whatever platform that you use. Right now, they offer like Twitch, YouTube, Facebook, Restream, Twitter, and there's some more, and you can even have your own custom one. But for now, we're going to do Twitch because I am a Twitch streamer. You pick your server. Usually by default, it is set to auto, which is recommended, and that is totally fine. I either do auto or I do Salt Lake City just because I live in Utah myself. Stream key, I will not show you my key because that is private information. But there is a tutorial here that tells you how to get your stream key from your Twitch channel. But if you don't want to get it manually and copy and paste it here, you can just link your account to OBS right here with connect account, and it'll just automatically generate the stream key into OBS. So that'll make it a lot easier for you. Right here, it says ignore streaming service settings recommendations. Now you can click on this if you have the internet to send out a higher bandwidth or a higher bit rate. But if you don't really have the internet settings for that, it doesn't matter, or this doesn't matter, so you don't have to click on this at all. And next, we're going to go to Output. Now, to me, I think this is the most important part in OBS settings. This is what's going to make sure your stream does work correctly. I said this before, but I kind of messed this up, so I'm going to try to say this again, or say this correctly. First thing is, I have it set to advanced. Having it advanced will let you have more control on what to change here, so I recommend doing that. I have here the encoder, which is NVIDIA NVENC H246 or 264. This is one that comes specifically with NVIDIA graphics cards, I believe the 2000 series or higher. And this is what I always recommend if you have a graphics card. Now, anything with a graphics card, I think it's NVIDIA NVENC or AMD NVENC, which means that your computer will use your graphics card to process your stream instead of your CPU or processor. There is a setting that says just H264. I don't recommend using that unless you're only running a CPU in your computer, then that is your only option. But because your computer is using your CPU for so many other things, it'll make it really hard to prioritize streaming or to stream properly with it running everything else in the background, especially if you don't have a good CPU. So I highly recommend, if you're going to stream, have a graphics card, and that way you can use the NVENC setting. That will make it a lot easier for your computer to process everything before sending it over to Twitch. Rescale Output. Now, I didn't know this before, but I did some research before this second recording. Now, this is for your stream settings. Now, by default, it is set to the original setting for your normal output, which for me was 1920 by 1080p, but that means that OBS will be sending out a 1920 by 1080p stream or recording to Twitch to stream, which means that it's using a lot more resources to send such a high definition video. So what I did is I clicked on Rescale Output, change it to 1280 by 720. And that way, even though I'm streaming or I'm recording to 1920 by 1080p, it is only sending a 720p signal to Twitch. So it's not using my bandwidth as much when it's sending that over. So I definitely recommend this if you want your OBS to still, display a 1080p like preview, but you only want it to send it at 720p so that you're not using your internet as much. I definitely recommend using this setting to change your output scaling. Your rate control, I think by default it is set to CBR, which I think is just the standard for anyone. I don't know what each different rate control does. I just read online that everyone always recommends CBR unless like they have very specific situations. So you don't have to change this at all. Bitrate is going to be, I think, the most important thing here. Now, if you do not know what bitrate is basically the kilobits per second that OBS is going to send to Twitch for you to stream. Now, Twitch supposedly only allows a maximum of 6,000. Now, when you send out 6,000 kilobits per second, that does require a lot of bandwidth so that OBS can properly send all that information over to Twitch. And if you just do not have the internet for that, it's just gonna be, you're gonna constantly be losing frames. Your stream is not gonna look as clear. It's going to stagger a lot, or it's going to buffer a lot. So what I recommend, I even do this myself. I have Google Fiber internet. So like for me, it is a really nice internet speed with just like 1 gigabyte download, but I still have it at 3,500 kilobits because I don't need all of that to be sent to Twitch, especially if I'm going to have so many other things open. When I'm just using a 1080p source, sending it to 720p, and I'm only doing 30 frames per second, 3,500 kilobits is totally fine. It's like kind of the recommended for that resolution. So I definitely recommend lowering it from 6,000 to 35, or if you need to, 25 or 15, whatever. Just whatever seems to fit best for you. Now, keyframe intervals, I don't fully remember what this is. I do believe, if I remember correctly, it's either this or it's going to be max B frames, where how much further your stream is, or not your stream, OBS is going to buffer for you in advance, so that, or how many frames in advance is it going to buffer for you for your stream. I've seen both keyframe interval and max B frame set to 2. That's what they recommend. So I just say keep it as that, or keep it as 0. Honestly, I haven't really noticed much of a difference myself. Preset low latency performance. Now this is basically how you want, or basically the quality level that you want OBS to send the information over to Twitch. So usually there's like max quality all the way to max performance. So max quality is the best stream possible, no matter how many resources it's going to use. Max performance means your quality or your stream quality will not be that good, but it'll try to make sure your resources are going to be running as best as possible, or as optimal as possible, to make sure your stream is running smoothly, even if it's not going to be as clear. And then you have low latency settings for all of those to try to make sure that OBS will send the information as soon as possible, so that you don't have that latency between like you and your chat popping up, right? For me, I have low latency performance because I do love the performance, but I do also want to make sure that chat can pop up like as soon as I'm talking. You have profile here. You have high, main, and baseline. I don't know what these mean at all, so we're going to skip over this. I have it set to high, which I think is the default setting. Like I said, I don't really know what it is, but we will leave that alone there. Look ahead is basically, look ahead is like a smart version of max B frames, where max B frames will always look 2 frames ahead to buffer everything correctly, while look ahead will just try to do it as far as it possibly can with the resources that your GPU will give it, right? I don't check mark this because as you can see here, if enabled, it will increase visual quality, but at the cost of increased GPU utilization, and I don't really want to raise that. So psycho-visual tuning is basically OBS is going to use your graphics card to increase the quality of your stream, especially when there's high motion in your stream, because there can be issues where there's a lot of pixelating when you're like turning real fast in a game. So psycho-visual tuning will try to fix that to make sure that it looks as clear as possible when you're like moving really quickly in game. A couple things that I want to touch, even though they aren't fully specified in streaming. Recording, basically these are the settings that you can set up to record or for your recordings like I am doing right now. For me, I have it automatically set to MP4. I recommend doing this because I have had issues in the past where someone has recorded in an MKV file, and for some reason when I tried editing the video, it just kept on losing frames of the video before I could even edit it. So I had to like just cut those out, which was really annoying. MP4, I've never lost any sort of information, and I was able to edit just fine with that. Plus, I think it takes up a lot less space. So I recommend changing your recording format to MP4. We have audio. Now this one I do think is kind of important. I think by default, audio bitrate is set to 144 or 148, I think. And audio bitrate, just kind of like video bitrate, but just for the audio, is how much information is it gonna send to Twitch. I've lowered it to 128 because I haven't really noticed any significant difference to my audio in my stream, and it does take up less resources when I do stream. So when you go to audio, I recommend changing your audio bitrate to 128. Track 1 specifically, because everything should automatically be set to track 1, but I just set it to all of them just in case. So in audio settings, there isn't really much for you to change here. You have your sample rate, which should always be 44.1. I don't think it gives you another option. Stereo settings, which is always better than mono. I mean preference, but I usually prefer stereo. And then you can change what is going to be your input devices for whatever you're using. So like for desktop audio, which is for all of my sounds that is not me or Discord talking, is going to go through voice meter input. My first specific microphone is going to be using NVIDIA Broadcast. That's pretty much the default settings that I'm going to have. Everything else I don't really know. As far as I know, it's not really important unless you want to change like your monitoring device, your decay rate, anything like that. But as far as I know, none of this is really important, and there's like some more hotkeys and push to talk. Most important thing is probably just making sure that you have the right devices for your desktop and your microphone here. Now that we're in video settings, for this part, it's kind of confusing at first. It's like a mix of what's best for your stream and what's best for your recording. What I have here is base or canvas resolution is 1920 by 1080p. That is basically when I have OBS set up, the screen that is previewing everything is going to be 1920 by 1080p. And that is totally fine to me because that's how I have all my overlays and stuff set to. Output or scaled resolution. Now, at first I thought this was for both recording and for streaming, and I think this used to be the case, but not anymore, because if you go to output here, you can rescale the output resolution for streaming specifically. And if you go to video, this looks like this scales your resolution down depending on what you want for video recording instead. So we're gonna leave that there because I want things to be recorded at 720p. Downscale filter is bilinear, which is the fastest but blurry of scaling. You can see that. You have more options below, like LASCO, I think is lossless as well, which do use more resources, but you'll get better quality in them. I haven't really noticed a difference in quality. I've noticed that it does use a lot more resources, so I'd say use bilinear when you can. And then you have your frame rate that you want your videos set to. Now for me, like I said, I have good internet, but because of my bit rate and because I don't really think it's necessary for myself, I have it set to 30 FPS, and I think that's totally fine. Like I said, I haven't noticed a difference, not when I'm editing videos, not when I'm streaming. I think it's totally fine. Now, the confusing part that I didn't want to say about this is, like I said, with output resolution, I thought this was the same as streaming, like this would be for both streaming and recording. Like I said earlier, they changed that out, but downscale filtering and frames per second or FPS, that is still being used for both of them. So even if you have your output set to 1080p here and 720p here, it'll still be doing it at 30 FPS for both of them. It'll still be filtering bilinear for both of them. So just keep that in mind when you want to change these two, is that it'll affect both your recordings and your streams. Okay, so now that we're in advanced, I'm actually going to skip over hotkeys because everyone knows what hotkeys is and I've never used them before, so I don't find them to be that important. So we're just going to go straight to advanced. Under general, there's process priority, which will basically have you say like, okay, what priority level do you want OBS to be at when you're using your GPU? Like, let's say you have a game open and you have OBS open. What do you want your GPU to focus on first? So I always have it set to high so that my GPU will focus on OBS first for good streaming quality, and then it'll focus on the game second. Video renderer should by default be Direct 3D 11. I think that's still the default renderer for games and videos in general, so don't even worry about that. Nothing here should really be changed. The only other important thing is maybe stream delay. So stream delay, I say mainly if you are playing online games, is very important because this will make it so that OBS will hold your information for however settings you want. Like this one by default is 20, and this will hold your information or the stream by like 20 seconds before it sends it to Twitch. That way you don't have issues where like maybe someone is stream sniping you. So if they're watching your stream, they know exactly where you are. They'll kill you, they'll hunt you down. Really annoying stuff. I've had that happen to me before. But turning on stream delay will make sure that even if they can see your stream, it's a lot harder for them to track you because they're 20 seconds behind on the video. So if you are doing a lot of online games, definitely use stream delay. If you're not doing that, if you're doing a single player game, or if you genuinely just do not care, you can keep this off because that way your stream will get to Twitch as soon as possible. Okay, so I hope that this video has helped you even a little bit, just understanding OBS settings a little bit more so that you know how to properly set up your stream. There's a lot of tutorials online to make sure that you can get the best stream quality so that you know exactly what settings you should have, because every person is different. But at least I just kind of wanted to show you the more important things so that you know what they do and how to set them up. But if you have any questions for the future, you can always reach out to me. My links are going to be down in the description below. I have Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and I try to respond to any messages that I get. So yeah, you can just try to reach out to me anywhere online. And if you want any suggestions on what you want to know, leave a comment down below. But if that is everything, I will see everyone in the next one. Goodbye.